So hi everyone and welcome to another Exploring Creativity session. We've been looking at Ada, the art robot created by Adrian Meller, and so we're going to focus on her portrait of the Queen in this practical, and we are going to start off with a really great idea suggested by Michelle, which is to do a drawing using blind contour drawing. So blind contour drawing, for those of you who don't know, is when you don't look at what you're drawing, you just focus your eyes completely on the subject that you're drawing and you don't look at your actual drawing that you're making. And you try and tune your eyes and hands into each other so that as your hand moves across, well, as your eye moves across the contour and the shape of the subject, your hand moves at the same pace. And it's a real meditative way of drawing. It sort of forces you to do pure observation because you're not looking back and forth from the subject to your drawing, and it also forces you to let go of the outcome because you can't see what your drawing is turning out like, so you can't make those critical decisions about your drawing as you're working on it because you can't see it. It's a really interesting exercise, and at the same time, to make it even more interesting, we're going to use our non-dominant hand. So if you're left-handed, normally you will be drawing with your right hand, and if you're right-handed you will be drawing with your left hand. So this is just to do the initial drawing, because my plan is to start out with drawing and then add some gouache and paint to the drawing. And I'm going to be working on smooth watercolor paper. So without further ado, let's start that process. Okay, so for the purposes of this practical, I'm going to use a stamp as my source material, and I might do more than one. We'll see how the time goes, and keep them quite simple. When I was looking at photographs of the Queen, one of the fascinating things is there are so many photographs of the Queen through the ages, you know, and historically it's an interesting, well, the whole monarchy is historically interesting, whatever your opinion of them. So and I'm going to use a mechanical pencil for this, and so with the blind contour drawing, what I'm going to do is I'm going to actually hold my picture up so that I'm not I'm going to place it on my knee so that I'm not able to see the drawing that I'm doing, because if it's next to it, I'm not going to be able to do a blind contour drawing. So just using a mechanical pencil, and I'm going to go really slowly with this blind contour drawing and try and keep my hand and my eye coordinated, so moving my eye really slowly up across the page. I mean, my eye is moving across my image, and my pencil is moving in sync across the page. So it's quite difficult to do because it's counterintuitive. You really want to look at your drawing as you're drawing it, and so you have to be very disciplined to keep your eye just on your subject matter and not look at your drawing at all. Oh, and the other thing which I forgot to mention, which now I'll mention now, is the other thing about doing this technique is that you keep your pencil in contact with the paper at all times, or your drawing implement, whatever you're using to draw. You can do this with a brush. One of my students does that to great effect. And so, you know, there's three things. You're not looking at the drawing that you're making. You're keeping your, oh, and I forgot I'm using the wrong hand. I'm supposed to be using your non-hand, so I'm going to have to swap. Finish.
Do we have to do it like that, or can we do a different?
Do it however you want. But this is if
Okay.
you want to join the way I'm doing it. Okay, so that's come out better than because I used my normal hand. I'm left-handed, so now I'm going to switch to my non-dominant hand because I forgot that part of the exercise, and I'm going to continue with the blind contour drawing and start putting in the detail. Yeah, you don't have to do it this way. Obviously, you can do it as I just said, however you would like, but this is a very good method to try whether you want to do it today or not. It's just the drawings come out looking so weird and interesting, and it's a really good way of freeing you up and also freeing you from, you know, being anxious about how your drawing's going to look because you can't see you can't see it, so you know it's going to turn out looking quite mighty strange, if you like. And the thing as well of not being able to lift your pencil off the page means that you have to kind of consider the marks as you're trying to connect one thing, one area to another, or draw like the parts in between. And this as well, an interesting exercise you can do if you want to take this further is to do one blind contour drawing in one colour and then switch colours and do another blind contour drawing over the top in a different colour. You can do that as many times as you like, and that creates a lovely abstract kind of type of drawing, which is quite nice. Wow. So I'm pretty happy with that. Kind of lost the initial drawing completely. That's okay. Oh, I need to put her necklace in. So I put in the necklace. I'm going to rework. The other thing with a blind contour drawing is you can do one and then you can rework it, you know, and sort of once you've done it, then you can look at it and you can then, you know, for example, here the nose is completely lost. So I'm going to go back. If I place my pencil where I want, you know, and then I'm going to continue with the blind contour drawing from that point. So I'm still in keeping with, and also, you know, I'm using my non-dominant hand. I'm loving how this is turning out. And then, so yeah, I'm going to do more detail on the crown because I put that in the wrong place. So again, sort of placing my pencil where I want it, and then going into a blind contour drawing from that spot. And then the other thing you can do with the blind contour drawing is you can rework it after you look at it. You know, you can start off with the blind contour drawing and then you know, do as much as you can without looking, and then you can look, and then you can make changes afterwards. So start doing a regular drawing where you then, because I mean this nose is just silly, so I'm afraid I can't live with it. I am going to change it. So you can then rework it and start making it more like a regular drawing. So I think my unconscious opinions about the monarchy are coming out in this. You know, so you can change and adapt. I've switched now back to my dominant hand, my left hand, but I'm still doing blind contour. Okay, but for the stampy bit, I'm just gonna sort of rework it a little bit. Keep the nose again. So it definitely has the quality. It's such a great idea. Michelle. It definitely has like the quality of an Ada. If you've seen her art, of an Ada artwork, I think, if you ask me. So I'm going to put in so it's clearly stamped, but again doing it with my non-dominant hand and also doing it blind, which is going to be kind of tricky, obviously. Oh, right, so that's gone like all over the place. Yeah. It's one of those things that when you do it and then you look back and you think, oh, actually, I want to change it, I want to make it more. It's tricky you don't want to ruin the kind of, when you're doing the blind contour work, it has this kind of amazing, very distinct sort of feel to it, and you want to kind of retain that. It's almost like it sort of has this naive, if you want to get close to how very small children draw, this is a method you might use, because it has that kind of raw sort of scribbly free edge to it, but at the same time I'm going to kind of then rework it. It's the kind of thing, it's then difficult to know how much of the naivety and the free scribbling to keep and how much to get rid of. So for example, in the lettering here, I can make it a bit more readable, but at the same time I want to retain that sort of dichotomy of freedom and so this was the hair. Looks like roses. There's a lot of when you work in this way, it kind of brings up, it can bring up a lot of unconscious stuff, but also hidden meaning. I mean, when the first is going into her mouth, you're thinking, well, it's making me think about what it must be like, sort of, they say bird in a gilded cage kind of thing, that has been born into monarchy or born into that kind of role. It's like your life is dictated by it. You're not going to have much freedom necessarily unless you leave, and then whether to leave, all that sort of thing. Anyway, so I've got my drawing. I'm quite happy with that, actually. I'm just going to do a little bit more to the back of the hair, just to tighten it up a bit, kind of make it more, and a little bit more to the crown. Okay, and then, so the next thing, what I'm going to do with this one is I'm going to use gouache to add some colour and maybe a little, I've got some metallic watercolours, so I'm going to add them as well to kind of just put in some colour, and I'll bring my stamp back. So when I'm painting, I'm going to be just painting normally with my left hand and looking at the source material for inspiration. Okay, so I'm going to put out some gouache first of all. I've got a bit of cadmium red here. And I'm going to add a little bit of white to it, because I want to create kind of a sort of flat, sort of fairly flat effect, or a slightly light, you know, I mean, the stamp is quite intense, the red on it, and it is like a cadmium red, quite orangey. So I don't want this to go pink, but I just want to add a little bit of white to sort of give it a bit of a lift, to make it, I don't know, I don't even know why, but anyway, I'm doing it. So I've got a soft flat brush, and I'm just going to dip it in the water. I don't want it to be horribly dripping wet, just a bit damp. And I'm going to then just mix those two together, and so you can see it's not really going pink, but just adding that tiny touch of white to the cadmium red just lifts it a bit, makes it less dark, obviously. And so now it's just a question of filling in. And the lovely thing about gouache is it's not as watery as watercolour, so your paper's less likely to wrinkle. It's much flatter, and the paper doesn't absorb it in the same way. It's also not so translucent, so it's kind of got more body to it. So I have added a little bit of more water to certain areas in my gouache, and you can get quite a nice sort of effect where it sort of becomes, there's a little bit of differentiation. It's not completely flat, but obviously you don't have to do that. You can keep it the same consistency if you want that flat effect that stamps have. And then with gouache, you can sort of go back into it with your brush and sort of spread it around a bit more if you want to kind of make changes or things like that, which is not so possible with watercolour, because watercolour tends to sort of soak into the page pretty much immediately. It won't kind of stay on the surface in the same way as gouache. So I've got that, and now what I'm going to do is add a little bit more white to the remains of my pink or my red in my palette, and I'm going to add a little bit more red as well, but less red this time, so it's going to come up much pinker. And then I'm going to use a smaller brush to then start adding in some of the details. And what I'm going to do is put it on slightly thinly, slightly less thick in some areas, because what I want to achieve is I want the pencil marks to show through. The thing about working with gouache as opposed to watercolour is that you can obscure the pencil marks if you put your gouache on thickly enough. Whereas with watercolour, it generally, if you've used graphite pencil and you haven't used water-soluble watercolour pencils, your pencil will show through, because watercolour is more transparent. So to achieve, if you want the pencil marks to show through, to achieve that, you need to be aware of how watery, how thick the consistency of your gouache is. So with that in mind, I'm going to being aware of that as I'm working. I'm just going to kind of add in little details, for example, of the hair. So I'm going to pause the video just while I'm just going to go around and through the picture with my small brush, putting on these little details and some soft tones, copying the stamp. Okay, so the next thing is I'm just going to use some white gouache to describe the highlights and the white areas. And because I'm using cream paper, so the cream of the paper can be like the mid-tones. I mean, with this stamp, it's very graphic anyway. There isn't really much tonal value on there, but I just want to, for example, kind of emphasize the profile. And this way you can pick out little details by adding your white gouache. You can change the shape of things. You can make lines disappear, as I'm doing now with the nose there. So it's just a way of kind of choosing what you want to happen. And I'm going to go over the first of the stamp as well in the white to just be clear, which is makes her look like she's got a moustache. In a way, quite funny. The thing about gouache is as it dries, it changes a little bit like watercolour does. It kind of changes as it dries, but with gouache, it's more to do with the translucency and colour will sort of change. So, for example, when you first put the white down, it might appear to be very bright white, and then it kind of fades a little as it dries and becomes a little more transparent. Just something to be aware of when you're using it. You may have to do several layers of the white to really get the kind of thickness if you want it to be thick. And so just adding one or two more bits to it. Then what I'm going to do is I've got these metallic silver and gold watercolours, and I just want to pop some of those, well, some gold anyway, onto the piece. Just before that, I'm just putting some minor adjustments to the eye area. Okay, so just want to add some gold. I know this isn't correct in terms of a stamp, but as I often say, you know, there comes a point where it becomes more about your actual work of art than your source material. You start really feeling the work, you know, and making changes that aren't necessarily true to your image or subject that you're using as inspiration. So it's always an important kind of thing to bear in mind when you're working. So just want to do a little bit more of adjustment to the eye area, and then I'm going to call it a day after that. because even though I want to retain the sort of spontaneity of the blind contour drawing, I also at the same time want to make it have a bit of, well, not realism exactly, but just kind of humanity. Ironically, seeing as we're tackling the robot artist today. Actually looking more like Princess Diana than the Queen. That's kind of ironic. As she would have been one day. Well, although they got divorced, didn't they? So she wouldn't. But potentially could have, would have, should have. Anyway, so I'm going to end there. And I hope you all enjoyed that demo, especially the blind contour drawing part of it. Something I talk about a lot, and I think it's a wonderful technique that everybody should at least try once in their life. As an artist, it's fun. So I'll say goodbye and see you next time.